certainly for both Ali and I, one of the things that's really high on our radar is going to be this MCAS oxalate overlap. So if I start out with that, because that's kind of one of the bigger questions, the important thing here is that oxalate is acting as an irritant to both the nervous system and the immune system. The big deal with oxalate as regards MCAS, and I'm going to say also histamine intolerance, salicylate intolerance, a lot of these other systemic kinds of issues where it's not just one part of your body, it's the whole body that's being impacted. And the biggest thing here is that oxalate can irritate the mitochondria of the cells. And so the nervous system can be irritated. That's one of the reasons why I think we have so many people who also have challenges with nervous system regulation. But the immune system cells, like the mast cells, are being affected. And when we release histamine, that has a huge impact on the nervous system and our ability to regulate. And once the immune system's really vigilant, when it's really overstimulated by what oxalate's doing in the body, you can tip over into this MCAS world. And particularly if you've got oxalate, you've got other kinds of health stressors, you might have stress in general in your life. And because life can be stressful, that's not unusual. All those things may collude together with your immune system becoming, I'm going to say, hyper vigilant, higher and higher in terms of its reactivity. But your nervous system is also getting more hyper vigilant and reactive over time. And the combination of those two things can really land us in a place where it may feel like we react to everything, where we're never getting a break from it. So unlike typical oxalate dumping, where you would have waves, you'd have a wave of oxalate, you clear it, you have a wave of oxalate, you clear it. And there's not necessarily initially, but over time, kind of a pattern to what's happening with oxalate dumping when you would have symptoms that worsen in response to this oxalate movement. With histamine, all bets are off. You can be 24/7 dealing with reactivity, and to some degree also without good pattern, like something that you ate one day, which is fine, another day might not be fine. And that can be the combination of histamine and oxalate. So when I interact in places where people are talking about MCAS, I'm very much struck by the overlap between the kinds of symptoms that you have with oxalate and the kinds of symptoms that you have with MCAS, and it being more a question of degree rather than completely different things. So we can talk a little bit more about how this gets set up, but do you want to add some perspective on that from your standpoint, Ali?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like just adding on to what you were saying of it's a multi-lever type situation of there's some environmental aspects. I know there's probably some people in here that have had mold exposure before or just stressful jobs or just things that are going to contribute to reactive cells. And it's almost like where the more and more information comes out about how underdiagnosed MCAS is and how it starts out as, anxiety or IBS, and then it like turns, or, allergies, just regular allergies. It leads me to feel like, and I know we've tossed this around where it's this more of a neuroimmune dysfunction, like everyone's cells are capable of doing that type of thing if all of those levers are into play. So it's just a matter of pulling on the right levers to reduce the inflammation in all the different areas of the body almost simultaneously, and then helping to rebuild from that foundational mineral nutritional perspective, sans toxins that irritate cells. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, where people are like, oh, you have an oxalate sensitivity, and you're like, no, everyone does. Oxalate is a toxin in your body. So it's similarly of like, we all have cells, all of our cells are reacting to things in their environment, and all of them are able to get into this loop where they don't stop.
Yeah. And truly, the loops can come from every direction. Like the more I worried about my health, the more likely when I had a symptom, I was going to be more worried. It can come from the nervous system, it can come from the immune system. It's definitely the two-headed beast in this case, at least two-headed. Although I'm going to throw salicylate in here when you're talking about MCAS, because it turns out that too much salicylate in the body can act as a mast cell irritant, and that if you're having issues with salicylate, then that can also set off your mast cells. So we've got essentially what I've often referred to as a three-ring circus here. Oxalate is doing a number of things, including impacting energy level down at the tissue level. So unfortunately, our tissues may not have enough bandwidth to do the amount of work that they might need to do when they're dealing with oxalate. And then you can also have oxalate specifically impacting certain organs more than others. I'm going to argue, like the liver. And in the case of the liver, you have cell transporters which move sulfate, but which also move oxalate. And so if you have an abundance of oxalate in the system, then all of a sudden these cells who may be looking for sulfate so they can run something important like detox, and then they can't do it because they're taking up oxalate into the cell instead of getting rid of oxalate out of a cell. And that leaves them in a deficit for the sulfate that they do need. And in order to detox salicylate, one of the things you need is sulfate. And so there's areas here where you can sort of understand how we end up in the pickle that we're in. So when people tell me that they have salicylate issues, I now would argue that except in certain kinds of genetic conditions, if you discover you have a salicylate issue, you've got an oxalate issue. I'd make the same argument in terms of histamine. If you discover you have a histamine issue, you've got an oxalate issue. Because if your histamine has gotten to the level where it's unmanageable, it's not just allergies. Because I grew up having allergies. It's not unmanageable, right? So as soon as you get to this level of unmanageable symptoms or like more extreme symptoms, I think you're probably starting to be in the neighborhood of MCAS, even if you haven't been diagnosed that way.
So 100% agree.
Yeah. So I think that the problem here is overlapping and related health challenges. And that while you probably can end up with an MCAS diagnosis without having oxalate as a primary driver, I would always look for it as at least a secondary issue, creating more stress in the body and then resulting in other kinds of work that we can't do. And the fact that it depletes our minerals, which are so critical for so many key processes, never mind all the other things that a cell does, but maybe it needs to have energy. And if it doesn't have energy, and so not only is oxalate acting as a mitochondrial toxin, but if it's depleting things like magnesium, you cannot build ATP, and that's your energy molecule. So we've just got so many things which swirl into this area. But I think we're also living in a world where we're getting exposed to so many different kinds of toxins. It's just a really difficult situation. It's a perfect storm. And the biggest thing where you have 100% of the levers, and I'm going to pass this back to Ali at this point, is managing your nervous system. You have the levers there. Your physiology can be hijacking you, but you have levers that remain under your control, regardless of whether or not your physiology is hijacking you. So this is one of those places where it's not my wheelhouse as a nutritionist to be talking about stuff like nervous system regulation, but where I've found it to be so key in my own personal healing journey. And Ali can certainly speak to this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I 100% agree. I feel like the nervous system, I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, your nervous system is the only thing you can take with you, right? So we have to figure out how to keep it okay, how to keep it calm, how to bring it back, and there's all that science. I love it only takes 90 seconds to feel through an emotion. And you're really, I believe, because I also believe that emotion gets trapped in the body. We can talk about that more another day, like trapped in areas. So like fascial pain, like real pain, and it can be released because a lot of us have been taught since we were really young children to stop crying or, be quiet, or it's shameful to feel that feeling, or you can't be angry like that. But really, maybe our emotions are meant to be felt and, they're not something to be ashamed of. And so I think a lot of people, because we're meant to live in society, we start off with nervous systems that are a little bit wonky. And then we go into the real world where everything else is coming at you fast and everybody's working hard, and then life happens and we have kids, and everything just seems like the only thing that you can keep at a point of regulation that you really kind of can respond to would be the nervous system, and it controls everything. So there are things that happen in our bodies that are actual physiological responses that are as a result of a nervous system, like heart palpitations and blood pressure rising and anxiety and stomach aches and nausea, like really passing out, like you name it, like full body autonomic shutdown as a result of a nervous system response. So, it's not something that it's all in your head. It's incredibly real and results in physical symptoms. And so when that nervous system is always irritated, it's always sending off signals that are, I'm not safe, which results in inflammation and all of these increased symptoms that we all are suffering from, in addition to the diets that we're all eating, right? And so I think for a lot of years, and we were talking about this earlier, so it's funny because I started out, I thought I had this anxiety that I couldn't get rid of, and I would take Xanax on the way into my office, and I would, just trying to treat myself in any way that I could because I felt like it was normal to feel like you were having a panic attack every day when you went into work. And I was definitely eating high oxalate because at that time I was trying to be vegetarian because that was like all the yoga cool stuff, right? So I did 2 yoga teacher trainings and was just really trying, forcing my nervous system and trying to force it to regulate. Meanwhile, it was so inflamed from eating all of the oxalate and all the things that I didn't know about. And I think that it wasn't until I was able to put both pieces together that my body is finally remembering, or actually maybe relearning, what it's like to feel that calmness and to rebuild that resilience, so that when there is a flare, it's more of like, okay, I have a toolkit of things that I've built that I know that work now. What are the meals that make me feel safe that I can lean on? What are the supplements that make me feel the best? Let me get some minerals into my body. Let me take some vitamin B, and let me do some SSP, or go to the beach, put my feet in the ocean. I mean, there's plenty of free things that you can do. Like thymus thump is like my favorite. You can just tap your chest. That completely, it like wakes everything up, pulling on your ears, just some like random small things. But being able to keep all 3 in check, it kind of turns that like slim rope into the braided rope of where you have just more resilience in your body so that you can feel through the feelings. And then you start to be more aware of when this is oxalate dumping, or, oh, wait, there's histamine in play here. That's why I'm up at 3 a.m. and my brain won't stop, or, all the things that are in part. But it's definitely that multi-pronged approach. But the nervous system is important, but together they're so powerful.
If you put the nervous system back in charge, I really want us to make it very clear. Oxalate, MCAS, histamine, blah, blah, blah. Your symptoms are not in your head. That's that terrible thing that many of us have heard. I had a doctor who tried to diagnose me with an anxiety disorder. And so I want to be really clear about what we're trying to communicate here. What we're saying is the nervous system can be your ally in this healing process. We are not saying your physiology is not being hijacked. Oxalate hijacks your physiology. It hijacks your immune system, and you're going to have stuff going on that could be really big. And frankly, if I have a histamine flare now, won't be because of oxalate anymore, it'll be my stress. But if I have one now, I will still think some of the things I thought when I was first trying to deal with the low oxalate diet. I'll think this thing's going to kill me, and then I'll like shake my head and go, okay, you've been through this too many times. So what we want you to know is that there's this kind of walk that you have to do between the discomfort and straight ahead miserableness, that is MCAS, histamine, salicylate, whatever combination of symptoms that you've got, and attempting to make sure that your nervous system is actually on your side. It's not being so fully hijacked that it's as dysregulated as everything else in your system is. And to whatever extent we can, that's going to mean a toolkit that is about nervous system regulation, in addition to a toolkit which is about what nutrients you take in, what the order of priority is there, and any other kinds of tips and tools and techniques which are going to help us to navigate what we have to navigate because life happens. So it's not just oxalate dumping that's going to boot your butt around the block sometimes. Sometimes it'll be other things. But you might find that the toolkit you build to handle oxalate and histamine and salicylate, whatever pieces go along with it, could help you in lots of other ways too.